Have you ever heard of a man who built an empire with his faith? Of a commander who roared like a lion in the heart of battle, yet forgave like a prophet in the hour of triumph? Of a king who shuddered the cross, yet earned the praise of his enemies? He did not draw his sword for gold, nor did he fight for fame. He came to establish justice, to free the holy city from the claws of darkness, and to show the world that Islam is not merely the sword, it is wisdom, mercy, and majesty. His name echoes through the corridors of history with reverence. Salahuddin Ayyubi, the Lion of Islam, the conqueror of Jerusalem, the shadow of God on earth. But how did a child born to a family in exile rise to become the greatest hero of the Islamic world? How did he raise the banner of unity amid chaos, wars, and betrayal? And how did the very Crusaders who faced him in battle speak of him with awe for centuries after? This is not just a historical tale, it is a living legend of faith, of courage, of mercy, and an unbreakable will. Join us on a journey into the heart of the medieval world, to the battlefields and citadels of the Levant, where one man reshaped the course of history forever. Salahuddin was born Yusuf ibn Ayyub in Tikrit, in modern-day Iraq, around the year 1137, the very night his family fled the city. His father, Najmuddin Ayyub, a Kurdish military governor, belonged to the Rawadia tribe from Ajanikan, near Dovan in Armenia. Over time, the family began adapting Arab culture. In 1132, Najmuddin famously ferried the retreating army of Imaduddin Zengi across the Tigris at Tikrit, injuring a local governor. By 1137, he was banished by the soldier commander Behruz, and that very night, Yusuf, later known as Salahuddin, was born. By 1139, the family had relocated to Mosul. Imaduddin Zengi, in gratitude, granted Najm command of the fortress of Balbak. These early years exposed young Yusuf to the volatile politics of the Zengid court under Nuruddin. Biographers emphasize that he was raised in a pious, disciplined Islamic household. Growing up in Mosul and Damascus, Yusuf received a broad education in the Islamic sciences. Medieval sources note his studies in grammar, arithmetic, geometry, even Euclid and astronomy. But above all, he was deeply devoted to the Quran and religious learning. His secretary Bahauddin ibn Shaddad, a Kurdish judge who later authored his biography, describes Salahuddin as deeply pious. He was devoted to the recitation of the Quran, performed his prayers on time, and showed deep respect for scholars and pious men. From an early age, Yusuf was captivated by the concept of jihad. Bahauddin would later recall, he spoke of nothing but jihad, and no hour passed for him without either preparing for it or reflecting on its matters. By his 20s, Yusuf had already proven himself a skilled cavalry commander in Nuruddin's campaigns against the Crusader states. In 1164, Nuruddin sent Shirkuh, Saladin's uncle and a seasoned commander, to Egypt. Yusuf accompanied him. Their mission: restore the ousted Vizier Shawar to power. But the campaign quickly escalated into a contest for control of the Fatimid throne. Salahuddin distinguished himself through military prowess and earned the trust of the young Fatimid Caliph Al-Adid. When Shirkuh died in 1169 and Shawar had been assassinated, Al-Adid appointed Yusuf as Vizier of Egypt. This was an astonishing decision. All odds were against this young and inexperienced Sunni Kurd. Yet, Salahuddin had earned it after years of resistance against the Crusaders in Egypt. By 1171, following Nuruddin's directive and at his father's urging, Salahuddin abolished the Fatimid Caliphate. The Shiite court was dissolved, and Egypt returned to the fold of Sunni Islam under the Abbasid Caliphate. At just 34 years old, Salahuddin was now the ruler of a unified Sunni-governed Egypt. Nuruddin died in 1174, leaving a young heir. The political vacuum in Syria posed both a danger and an opportunity. The governor of Damascus called on Saladin for aid for the sake of Islam. Salahuddin answered the call. With just 700 hand-picked cavalry, he marched north. He entered Damascus peacefully in late 1174, making it his capital. Within a year, he had annexed the surrounding cities Hama, Hams, and Balbak, where his father had once served. He entrusted Damascus to his brother and pressed on, though Aleppo resisted. In 1175 to 1176, he defeated two counterattacks by Muslim forces, led by Saifuddin II. After one decisive victory, Salahuddin personally treated wounded enemy prisoners with mercy. He had them patched up, freed them, and even gave gifts to some of them, wrote Stanley Lane Poole. In 1175, after the Battle of the Horns of Hama, the Abbasid Caliph officially named him Sultan of Egypt and Syria. The Ayyubid realm was now vast, stretching from Egypt across the Levant, united under Sunni Islam. Salahuddin's greatest challenge came in 1187, a final confrontation with the Crusader kingdoms. By then, he had unified nearly all Muslim lands east of the Mediterranean. The Crusaders, led by the leprous King Baldwin IV and Leather Guy of Lusignan, were divided and vulnerable. On July 3rd to 4th, 1187, Salahuddin intercepted the Frankish army near the Horns of Hattin. The Crusaders, dehydrated and trapped, were overwhelmed by his cavalry and archers. The battle was a catastrophe for the Crusaders. The dead were scattered over the mountains and valleys, and the perfume of victory was thick with their stench, wrote his secretary Imad-ud-Din. King Gay was taken prisoner. Reynold of Chatillon, infamous for attacking Muslim pilgrims, was personally executed by Salahuddin. Most Frankish knights were held for ransom. Others were sold into slavery. Some 15,000 civilians were taken. 2 days later, Salahuddin ordered the execution of all captured Templar and Hospitaller knights, citing their brutality and broken truces. The Crusader military backbone was broken. Cities fell in rapid succession. By September 1187, Jerusalem stood defenseless. Most able-bodied men had perished. Around 100,000 civilians, mostly women and children, were inside. On September 20th, Salahuddin arrived and offered honorable surrender. The city's leader refused, trusting in divine intervention. Then began the fiercest struggle imaginable. Each side looked on the fight as absolute religious obligation. The Franks fought with desperation. After 8 days, the city sued for peace. Negotiations led by Baldwin the Evelyn resulted in generous terms. Civilians could live with their belongings for a ransom of 10 dinars each. Salahuddin freed Muslim prisoners and paid personally to free 7,000 poor Christians. Even Queen Sibella and noblewomen were allowed to live without ransom. About 15,000 Christians who could not pay were enslaved, according to the customs of war. The great golden across atop the Dome of the Rock was taken down. The Al-Aqsa Mosque was cleansed. On October 2nd, 1187, Salahuddin entered Jerusalem in triumph. He prayed in its holy shrines. The city was restored to Islam. Even in the blood-soaked pages of medieval warfare, there are rare figures whose moral light shines through the darkness, and Salahuddin was such a man. Though he was feared on the battlefield, he was equally admired of it, not only by Muslims, but even by his Christian foes. To his own people, he was Sultan al-Adil, a man who hated oppression and wept for the suffering of the poor. He fasted regularly, prayed punctually, avoided luxury, and gave away his personal wealth to the needy, so much so that, at his death, he left barely enough to cover his own funeral. According to Bahauddin ibn Shaddad, Salahuddin lived simply despite his vast power. He personally oversaw the distribution of food to the poor during famines and walked among his soldiers as an equal. He forgave enemies who begged for mercy, and when victory came, he never mocked the defeated. Even more astonishing, Western sources spoke of him with admiration and awe. The famous English chronicler William of Tyre describes Salahuddin as a man of great wisdom, piety, and temperance, while Richard the Lionheart himself, the iconic king of England, developed a mutual respect with Salahuddin during the Third Crusade. When Richard fell ill, Salahuddin sent his fresh fruit and his personal physician, a gesture that stunned both sides. During the siege of Jerusalem, Salahuddin not only allowed Christian holy sites to remain untouched, he also gave protection to fleeing civilians and personally paid the ransom of thousands of poor women, children, and elderly who could not afford their freedom. He was a warrior, yes, but one driven by a moral compass rooted in faith, a lion in the battle, and a guardian in peace. He was a man who hated injustice in any shape, a lion for the Muslims, but a lion's kindness for his people. Salahuddin continued to defend Muslim lands, resisting at Tyre in 1187, Acre in 1189, Jaffa in 1192, but he never again took a Crusader city. On March 4th, 1193, he died peacefully in Damascus. He had given away nearly all his personal wealth to the poor. His chivalry, piety, and justice made him a symbol of Islamic virtue. Centuries later, he remains revered across Arab, Kurdish, and Turkish cultures. Today, his mausoleum stands beside the Umayyad Mosque in Damascus, a lasting monument to a man whose life became legend. A hero of faith, mercy, and resistance, Salahuddin Ayyubi, the Lion of Islam.